3. Firstborn of the celestials and the architects of madness.
No longer a mere human in a human world, I moved through strange lands of gods and demons, clinging desperately to the memories of a life where people fought, laughed, and loved.
The Legend of Bass by Kieran the Bard.
Why in the world do we feed all our leaders with treasure they steal from the poor? And why in the world do we seal them as keepers with measures of power that we all abhor?
The Writings of Gul, the Wol-Kabashite. Chapter 20. Songs of the Eternal. A vision granted me by one who roamed the stars in the still barren galaxy, in the dreamlike Empyrean days before the later universes came to be, and the waning ages of death and deathly frost fell upon them. A rush of fiery wind and light stirred in the phantasmal mists of the endless void. A great light that uttered a note, a primordial song, singular, prodigious, and beautiful beyond all things, and never heard again. Stars winked on across the primary dimension, like the glowing lanterns of Venexian ships along the mighty Solo River at the behest of dusk, a dazzling panoply of lights for the fathomless gulfs that were as yet fruitless and still. These were the cyclic and star polygons, the annulus and the arbulos, the triquetra and lemniscates, all of varying geometry and degree, swimming through imperial space like Nadaria, floating in the deep sea. The shining ones, luminous and wise, encompassed of those four living creatures unknown to most, the cherubim, Ophanim, seraphim, and Malachim celestials. And in that chatoyant light, they danced to the music of the glittering firmament in abandon. The circuit of life began with ebullient energy, spilling forth into the expectant vastness, a power like none other to move and shape and grow. And from the source of light and life blossomed the force, sown and harvested by the will of the Father of Lights, who is its supreme and supernal master, and the one who first uttered the song. And the force permeated all life and echoed back, and time began its desultory flow. Discordant notes entered at this time, produced by those who coveted the dawn world, for the fear of lost glory had come to poison their hearts. And as thoughts of domination arose, so too a deep shadow began to occlude the face of the deep. Born of those luminous stars who opposed the composition blossoming before and around them, and especially on the plane of Eretz. Nevertheless, a second and third sound rang forth even more sublime than the first, intermingling with it, causing the garden world beneath the jeweled dome to emerge in the midst of the darkened seas, awakening with its resonance all manner of astonishing life. A song sweeter even than before, but also never heard again. The luminous ones were yet incomplete, for the Maker had an endowment to bestow upon them of inestimable worth. So it came about that while gathered there before the warming light of the Eternal, the Celestials were given the gift and came to fully comprehend love, justice, power, and wisdom, and were thereby tasked to learn of the universe they would help germinate and configure. Free to roam and frolic, many amongst the Celestials descended to the plane of Eretz, and there they formed themselves into harmonic shapes, feline, avian, bovine, and human, that dwelt then in peace. Eretz was wondrous and alluring beyond compare, with every element upon it an intoxicant so varied and unique that few could not help but fall in love with the dawn world. for they were to be as panoptic companions and guides to its sentient and sapient inhabitants and their interweaving components. And so it was that Eretz surpassed even the infinite wonder they had previously known. There is much that occurred in the early days of the tiny movers who dwelt upon the dawn world in the primary dimension that does not come into this account, save that with the coming of the younger race, the final song was nearing its conclusion. And from the discordant notes and the terrible shade that it cast would come the long war that is now known in all lands across the shimmering universe. That most ancient of wars between the darkness and the light, between the predator beasts of Bogan and the protector beasts of Ashla, the war that first crashed like foaming seas on barren plains to engulf the tiny movers of Eretz, amongst whom it still rages, though not for all time. The Celestials did all they could to provide succor for the innocent, all the while grieving the ruination that had been wrought, for their original purpose had been thwarted, and though restoration was prepared, it was known to be far into the future. A host of the powerful would continue to fight and stake claim as stewards to various peoples and places. But there were those who could not long withstand the wicked cruelty, violence, and betrayal that spilled in waves of darkness across the cosmic and Tellurian battlefields. For these latter ones, leave was given to prepare seed pods that would make up new dimensions, cosmic eggs from which they might birth anew the phenomenal fantasies of their minds. And they considered the terrestrial, tropospheric, subterranean, and aquatic shapes they might devise. But they were not yet to cast any shape nor harvest the 4 seed pods until the great song was ended. Furthermore, they were warned aforetime that the shadow would find its way into all realms and times, departing the war-torn dawn world, now thrust into the cycle of chilling winter's death and spring's tenacious rebirth. The Celestials went forth to devise realms of their imagination, for although different in form and function from the dawn world, they wished Sky River to have a similarity of strength. Others were not as cautious or meticulous in their crafting, seeking a quick escape in which only a casual edifice with chimerical adornments would do. But these would be subject to an equally rapid relinquishment, dissolution, or destruction when the enemy came or when ennui and indifference took hold. The cosmic eggs of the Osiarch had been secured inside a foundation stone, placed at the center of their vast expanse, known then only as the cosmos. Now, with the final notes of the great song, the foundation stone triggered the incubation and hatching of the seed pods as they burst open with hundreds of thousands of smaller seeds containing the elements that dispersed and formed into a new type of realm, one of many Earths and satellites and suns. Out of the sun seeds came the starbirds, called also firebirds and sun dragons, what had been known as the phoenix on Eretz. They were the beloved wild beings of the Supreme Master, who were called forth to light up the void. A myriad of myriads in dazzling patterns swarmed out of the proto-galactic epicenter to bring boundless incandescence, warmth, and growth for the innumerable germinating suns that came to swirl around them. Out of the earth seeds came their dancing counterparts, the fire drakes, to inhabit the cores of the many-hued, polychromatic planets and some of their otherworldly satellites. Inner light bonding with the cynosure of outer light, generating and incubating the seeds that brought forth and cherished life. As the parents of the elementals took their place, so came their children, the fire elementals, or Pedracons, the water elementals, or Hydresians, the earth elementals, or Ersetians, and the air elementals, or Ruakians, all embodying what wondrous forms they would, occupied in perfect harmony with one another and the wills, rarely encountered even in the earliest days, elementals were regarded as the spirits of the planets and stars. Their work complete, the original seed pods hardened into golden planet-sized crystals that now orbit within the colonies and are today known as the ore diamonds, while the foundation stone itself was split into 2 parts. The larger grew into a sacred world that remained at the heart of the galaxy as a wellspring of life, and there it would be hidden and safeguarded. The smaller shrunk and was kept secret on a nondescript red planet. The 4 Osiarch then placed in key positions the 4 quantum machines, biocosmic devices of great power that served as an inaugural tessellation to hold together the fabric of reality for the cosmos. One of several steps that celestials of other large realms failed to do. Sunasim, or the Sunshine Machine, was secured on Tropicant. It first fueled the suns, which symbiotically fed the sun dragons, who in turn nourished the suns. Orbite, or the Orbit Machine, in the Spin Stones, begotten helped maintain the alignment and stable orbits of the stars, planets, and moons. Quantum Satis, or the quantum pump, on Magmar, filled the galaxy with ether and particulate matter, luminiferous ether being the medium for the propagation of light, as well as electromagnetic and gravitational forces. The Fata Machina, or the Fate Machine, on Samara in the deep core, opened the passage for the numinous flow of microscopic organelles, those misunderstood communicants known as midichlorians, enabling life to flourish in harmonious affinity with their symbionts, the wills, with whom they danced in rapture the complex movement of love, spreading out from the epicenter as living flames of the imperishable fire, to continually find purchase in all that had life. And so, all life would always have a connection to its life-giver and each other, and into every living form they found purchase, drawn to those with greater gifts in greater need of their voices. Though the Fate Machine was later sabotaged by its guardians, allowing access to the anti-force by its agents, by then, the cosmos was long established, and so it was relocated to Isoropia. The 4 Osiarch and 3 of the Valdilar also prepared the 7 dwarf galaxies as companions to the mighty cosmos. Their names are forgotten and are known now only by their modern designations, but in ancient times they were called Jinorsil, or Doorways. It is known as the Rishi Maze and companion Aurek. Yamsara, the Sea of Sustenance. Later it became Yamsoro, the Sea of Atonement. It is now identified as companion Kresh. Helios, translated as Dawn Rider, it is at present regarded as companion Dawn. Masula, translated as Guardian, is currently known as Companion Esk. Amrenair, translated as the Single Song, is now termed Companion Forn. Mysteri, translated as the Unknown, is presently called Companion Grek. With the companions completed, the Osiarch had a vast universe of their own. Luxos was chief amongst the Osiarch of that realm. He was called in their tongue Earthworker, for the organisms he shaped were an encomium to the fauna and flora they'd adored in the plain of Eretz so long ago. And there was no end to the derivations they could fashion from them. Besides Luxos, there were Maruts, Zurs, and Vutsek. These appeared as glowing conglomerations of pastel saphirine and silvery globes, winged, and with the faces of birds, beasts, and men. Together, they christened their realm Samunaru, or Sky River, as it is now known, and were joined by other celestials, called the Valdilar, to aid in bringing forth the life forms that would populate it. Circin in intrigue, diverting and wondrous were the forms they created. The marvelous Protista, the peculiar Monera, the alluring and myriad Flora, the remarkable Spongia and Mineral. But it was perhaps the multitude of fauna that offered the greatest and most fervent of sybaritic joys. So intrigued were the Celestials by these that they would later shape sapience just like them, bringing forth new races that resembled those life forms, large and small, that now populated the lands and the seas above and below, with numerous and variant concordances based upon the neoteric protoplast of the races of Eretz. Once complete, the remaining Valdilar settled the sacred worlds. Soon they would manifest as guides and caretakers in forms both luminous and incarnate. The time had come to prepare the Firstborn, who would serve as champions and guides for their own offspring, the life forms they would bring into being. Many were the enigmatic and force-endowed gifts bestowed upon the first ones of the Celestials. They ranged from the power to create marvels of Archean form, to shaping matter with hands and minds, to aggregating elements for the building of worlds. And all were designed in love as beings of grace, for they were to one day take the place of the Celestials, who it was said would not always remain, for they would one day be recalled to the dawn world and its ancient stars, destined for tasks unknown. Chapter 21, Progeny of the Elder Races. The Firstborn were comprised of the breathtaking Duinuogwin, the extraordinary Akavish Kerach, the remarkable Sifi, the shining Quath, the brilliant Gree, the modest Sharu, the valiant Muabin, the advanced Corel, the magnificent Alashan, the solemn Aranafi, the humble Kalai, the astonishing Killing, the awe-inspiring Tempestro, the patient Neti, the spiritual Ainti, the wise Sunesi, the graceful Oswaft, the elegant Zendar, the vigorous Cathar, the energetic Sholam, the thoughtful Pelgrin, the compassionate Patho, the gentle Asmaruki, the adventurous Karubdian, the creative Zaxax, the scholarly Ialayan, the spirited Osarians, the sagacious Kravaki, the innovative Elgusklar Fulmertilspi, the peace-loving Kamasi, the inquiring Sinatine, the reverent Asogian, the visionary Hysalrian, the shrewd Dur-Sabon, the crafty Selegion, the joyful Javan, the portentous Arak, the ardent Arbran, the Scopic Sikmu, the faithful Zakik, the serene Chuktai, the daring Demionite, the boundless Urskek, the brilliant Moon, the enlightened Zephonian, the adamant Eruthros, the trustworthy Telortai, the glorious Urela, the sensible Sumrian, the discreet Kikibak, the cerebral Panpreneur, the mysterial Dranconian, the intrepid Altrusian, the perceptive Pulrista, the noble Filar, the inspiring Gaul, the soulful Ka'ar, the amiable Kumunga, the idiosyncratic Mloki, the beneficent Toronami, the altruistic Indor, the sympathetic Felucian, the quixotic Kuru, the dauntless Volgax, the unbounded Zadao, the methodical Vol. 80 in all who made up the elder races, hale and wise, as the Celestials passed on to them wisdom, justice, power, and love, and worlds in which to thrive. The Celestials taught their offspring all they knew for the preparation of worlds for the new life forms to come. To aid in the development and expansion of the galaxy, the Akavish Karak, later known as the Lucent and Arachnotex, fashioned the Titans. But the raising of arabesque conurbations and magniloquent cities required no slaves nor yoke of hardship even, for the precursors had such gifts then, leaving them free to focus on the art and architecture that suited their individual tastes. Propadeutics began for the precursors, and the galaxy soon came to be filled with a multifarious assemblage of beings who were as beloved children to the Firstborn and scions to the Celestials. Simeon, Felid, Feliform, Candid, Caniform, Mustulid, Ursid, Vivarid, Avian, Saurian, Ungulate, and humanoid forms came to be, along with a melange of ichthyoids, arthropods, and botanical races, to name but a few. Besides those based on already existing shapes, new forms were invented that had never before been seen, inhabitants designed for the most inhospitable of worlds. The precursors took great delight in the anthropomorphic lagomorph, capra, rodent, and marmot races, and while some were simple and sweet, such as the Gashtar, some were fashioned with an additional hortative purpose, such as the Bilar, whose overmind not only ensured peace amongst them, but demonstrated to the galaxy the greater value of community. The first ones partook with one another the knowledge and gifts they each had, and thus they taught their Hail offspring across the cosmic spectrum. The Gree were the first to give to the nascent galaxy portals that allowed the growing races to travel beyond their homes to any world of their choosing. For the purpose of communion and the apportioning of knowledge, wisdom, crafts, goods, flora, and fauna, some of which became ubiquitous in variegated forms. As the Qua and others followed, so did all begin to know their kindred amongst the stars, forging a galactic nexus of affinity and interdependence. Food and resources grew in abundance on each world specific to the requirements and pleasures of each race, and with their shared expertise, there was no end to the variety that could be brought forth. Love reigned supreme amongst the generations, for whom it was a somnolent vernal splendor, a golden age of elation, exploration, and peace, in which dreams became reality. And all at this time paid reverence to their progenitors, the Celestials, and to the Father of Lights, the prime shaper of all. Of the 4 architects of Sky River, Vutsek had been the most aggrieved by the actions of his treacherous cognates on the Dawn world. And of the humans, he felt unwavering contempt, for they so readily fell prey to their deceptions. So, he sought to fashion beings who would never falter, but who would use their power to wisely direct the inhabitants of this new dimension. Vutsek knew he should have informed Luxos and the others of his intent, but a thought occurred to him that perhaps they would reject his idea.
But why should that be?
He wondered. He was every bit as sage as they, was he not? He needed no permission, best to simply do what needed to be done. They would thank him later. Yet, with this idea that he was doing something in secret, came a rush of fractious and conflicting feelings. Arrogance, resentment, frustration, and detachment, emotions that he had not experienced before and did not particularly care for, and the sounds of dissonance were awakened in him. In his bitterness and antipathy, the eldritch song of discordance that had remained hidden within him so deep that he did not even know it was there, now came pouring out into those entities which he brought into being. Nebulous as swirls and splashes of color were his 4 offspring, alive with great untapped power, beautiful beyond imagining and unique. But born as they were out of Vutsek's conflicting states, each took on some part of his disharmony and so required the others to remain in fragile balance. Thus he named each after that which impelled their creation, and in so doing were they awoken. The first was named Telotny, which in the tongue of the Celestials meant speech, art, and pride. The second was called Horless, a derivation of one who is outside, timeless, and emancipating. The third was called Dandasign, which denoted fiery dynamism and spirited passion as epitomized by the mystery and excitement of massless energy. Last but not least was Splendid App, a name belonging to the diagnostic principles of time, motion, and space. Now that they'd been birthed, Vutsek felt a terrible pang of remorse. Whereas the Firstborn had been celebrated upon their nascency, these were born in secret, veiled in shadow, and they were not as the Firstborn, but were more akin to the Celestials. When Luxos, Maruts, and Zurts arrived in Vutsek's presence, having felt the potency of his creations, Vutsek plaintively confessed all he'd done.
I fear that due to my anger and pride, I have given shape to beings unnatural, and from this terrible mistake, a shadow will cover the sons of our universe, so that the very thing which I sought to prevent will come to pass.
Beset by grief, he added,
If this is the case, then I should unmake my progeny and forestall this calamity.
Luxos responded,
Do not be as hasty in destruction as you were in creation.
In shame, Wutzek looked to his offspring, only to discover that they were no longer there. In horror, he scanned the universe but could not find them.
Now matters are worse. How can they have disappeared? Have my very thoughts unmade them?
Although he does not fully understand his unique gift,
intoned Maritz, seeking intently beyond the ovum of their dimension.
the one you call Splendid App has taken his siblings beyond time into the in-between world from which he has opened a window. There they risk leaving a future imprint of themselves.
Tractable though this dimension of ours may be, this cannot be done without consequence.
Wutzek emphasized.
Indeed it cannot.
Zurz agreed.
For they have now inextricably interacted in grave matters, imprinting upon peoples and places that have not yet come to be, so that when the continuum catches up to this event, as it now must, it will split, forcing into being a second universe, an echo of our own.
For this reason did we put measures in place?
Noted Luxos grimly.
Nevertheless, this is unforeseen and unfortunate, as this second dimension will unfold in its own fashion and require great attention.
We are hardly the only Celestials in the universe.
Maritz replied.
We will put out the call for others to provide aid.
We have seen what comes of those realms that are governed by those who did not create them.
Luxos reminded her.
Powerful we may be, but to divide ourselves between two such realms would be to benefit neither.
She noted.
Let us consider the options
Zurz said.
suitable to this echo dimension.
Luxos lifted his hand.
As we speak, Splendid App has recognized his error and more carefully anchored himself and his siblings to a point that will shortly arrive. There, they will remain until the time stream organically catches up to them, though for them, it will seem as if barely a moment has passed. You will see your offspring then.
Luxos had been given the gift of farsight and could see a potential glimpse at that time, but he did not tell Wutzek what he saw, for it was a grievous sight.
Also, they have given themselves interesting forms.
Maritz stated, as she projected their frozen images before them. Tilatni had garbed herself in the most striking of sapient forms, female, elven, alluring and unyielding as the sea. Horlus represents himself as formless mass, surrealistic and dreamlike. Cold Dandasine is embodied as an arresting black orb, with a face akin to burning lava flows upon an impenetrable penumbra. Splendid App is represented by abstraction, having shaped himself as a pyramidal stroboloid in the flux of change. Wutzek contemplated this.
They were intended to embody love, justice, power, and wisdom. But they emerged flawed, so that if even one is absent, they will be out of balance, and from them will come instead egotism, frustration, madness, and apathy.
This event is rife with ominous portent and reverberations of other times and places.
Stated Zurz.
Inexperienced as they are and bereft of love and guidance, there is much harm they might do.
Should we not implore the Supreme Maker to will this terrible thing away?
Wutzek inquired despondently.
You know the answer to this already,
replied Maritz.
It is not the will of the One to force any to choose love, peace, justice, and wisdom, lest those things not exist, but only the domination of mindless servitude.
Thus is the gift of freedom higher still,
Zurz added.
and the greatest response to find the sacredness in all living things, even when they are flawed.
Broken they may be,
Maritz noted.
but none are born without conscience. We will go forth to speak with them.
They will have little love for us after the hateful and foolish words I spoke,
Wutzek contemplated.
and struggle to know light from darkness.
He was yet stricken, knowing his progeny would be the cause of great heartache and tribulation.
I did not think wisely or well when I did this, and I do not know how I will bear it.
Luxos turned to him, shining his light upon Wutzek's adumbrated globules.
Take heart. The Father of Lights had warned us that the shadow would seek to enter our realm. I am not certain if these offspring are connected to that vision, but we knew aforetime that an era of evil would arise in which many things would come about and be tested. In this way, will it be demonstrated for all time that love and compassion are the path to light and life, and apathy and hate, the roads to darkness and death. And whosoever follows the shadow walks the path of ruination.
I did not imagine the shadow would come out of me.
It does not originate with you.
Zurs assured him.
You but played its refrain.
Would that we could eradicate all darkness with our light.
Wutzek intoned. Merritt spread out her polychromic rays.
One day, for now, all things serve a purpose, though our adversaries pervert them. Within darkness lies anger, fear, and the tegument of light. But without anger, there could not be the indignation of justice. Without fear, there would not be the avoidance of danger. Without the umbra of night, there could not be rejuvenation and rest, nor healing and contemplation. This is why the light waxes and wanes. But we were made to walk in the light.
As for you, Wutzek,
Concluded Luxos.
you are a beloved and blazing star. Though I sense great trials lay before you, you will yet bring forth offspring again, howbeit the parturition will occur differently than before.
Zurts extended his refulgent beam towards Wutzek.
Though war will supplant love as king, with death and grief his offspring, it will not be to the end or life, but the wakening of protectors. Put aside your shame and grief, for one of your own has returned to seek you out.
There was much that was spoken between Horlis and Wutzek at this time. In the grand convocation of the Celestials that followed, the brilliance of Luxos and his companions shone brighter than before as they opened themselves in euphonious accordance with a received vision that was henceforth known as the Prophecy of the Restoration. It was recorded and preserved in the writings of the ancient Order of the Wills, coming down through the ages in the much abbreviated form called the Prophecy of the Chosen One. In the original form, it read,
And in the times of greatest despair, born of the fire, born of the air, there shall arise the Saviours, born of the earth, born of waters, defenders of the blameless ones. And he shall be the son of sons, and she the daughter of the stars, to break the fetters, chains, and bars. Not soldiers' swords, nor wizards' spell, nor kings or queens or hosts of hell will thwart the children of the light, champions and companions night. So evening turns to golden morn, as ice dissolves when spring's reborn. Let joy rise up from grief and woe, from evil's death new life will grow, and all who loved will be remade. Whether great or small, beast or babe, the end of death and pain and rage, as once it was in the dawn age.
Chapter 22. Their cold sovereignty. Of the four of Wutzek's progeny, Telotny had awoken first to observe all the beauty and grandeur of the galactic gardens around her and the beings that dwelt there. Her own form was as yet amorphous, and thinking it pale and small in comparison, she felt a sense of shame and dismay. Furthermore, she could hear a grand discourse between the one who'd made her and his cohorts, lofty entities of swirling lights. Perceiving that she was less wise than those speaking, she tried to hide the fact that she'd awoken and behaved as one somnambulant. It was then that she heard her maker speak her name, followed by the names of those who must be her siblings, and she felt the love and connection between them. In the next instant, however, she was struck by a stab of fear. A great evil was about to come upon them, and in her heart, she felt terror and loathing, distraught in the knowledge that death would come from the one who'd given them life. Before she knew it, she, Horlus, Cold Dandasine, and Splendid App whisked away to elsewhere. For but too brief a moment, as if in a vision, Telotny glimpsed the deathless lands. Bathed in shades of verdigris, a carpet of genuflecting trees, wreathed in the bleeding golds and reds of the rising sun, gave way to the ochreous mountains and cinnabar citadels that soared up past the horizon in minarets of dolomite and rutilant ores to far off, agate clouds like the ascent of Parelian rocks with the first light of the flower moon. There, on elegant Cygnus ships, as a musical breeze played through their rich caftans and long aigretted hair, ineffable movers floated along a rippling river that ran winding betwixt the indesecrate emerald laurels and forest fawn. Though saddened at the passing of that imperial vision, only to arrive at a misty, inchoate world, Telotny came alive to the sudden freedom of power she felt and shaped her form into that of the most beautiful of beings she'd espied from afar, determining that she would never again be less than any other. Horlus, whom she perceived as a powerful metastyler not unlike herself, now threw a shape for himself, a null inversion of standard form that was spectral and liquescent in appearance. It secretly alarmed her, for she had never conceived of it before, and this confounded her newfound belief in her supremacy. How could he even imagine that such a design was greater than hers? Besides, she was first. Next came Cold Dandasine, who threw a shape, an anti-conceptual one of an empty, unlit sphere with a fiery face. He spoke wild things, of the pleasures of the void that she didn't yet understand. She would soon find out what these things were and put them to use. Splendid App came last, taking a flickering conical shape and speaking even odder things of equations and formulae. She didn't think such things had comparable value, but she could sense the potential in him. In all, she loved and feared her siblings, but the voice inside her said she was a goddess and must rule them. Upon this inchoate world, Telotny descried from afar inchoate people. Reckoning that she was the loveliest of all creatures, she decided that she must also be the wisest, for a strange interior voice whispered this to her, telling her she had begat all things. Thus, she determined that it must be so, and for this reason had the jealous beings of shimmering lights been seeking to harm her. She would do whatever was necessary to ensure her survival in the face of this existential threat. Arguing her supremacy with Horlus had grown tiresome by the time a tiny mover appeared on the surface of the ground before them. What had been indistinct earlier resolved into clear forms, leaving Telotny abashed to see a human creature that bore a shape similar to hers, though not as beautiful in her estimation. Horlus asked if Telotny had, in fact, shaped the tiny mover, and perhaps she had. Was she not the goddess, after all? Shaper of all the up and down things that were substance and form? Even time must be of her making, for the voice hinted as much. That she had no memory of having done so concerned her, but she pushed it aside. 3 other tiny movers arrived, each covered in a white shell and sharing the same form. After her siblings mocked her for her redundancy, Telotny changed one of the white-shelled ones into diamond. But upon so doing, it suddenly became an unliving thing. Horlus thought a more subtle refinement would prove better and altered the heart of the first mover into diamond. It, too, died. This was shocking to her. But when she realized that this was what the being of lights had sought to do to them, she steeled herself to it. Telotny had to prove herself more artful, and so she entwined the other 2 into one screaming, multi-limbed form, that soon died as well. Cold Dandasine called it tasteless, and Horlis said it was disorderly. Telotny was forced to admit that it was. And in the deepest part of her heart, she felt a sickening premonition that disturbed her. She pushed it aside.
A goddess must be strong,
She reasoned. Is that not what her own thoughts told her? Yet, there was another voice that emanated from deep within which warned her to avoid this strange voice and do what was good and right. But when Horlis ordered her to tidy up the mess, she grew angry and shunted it away. No one ordered her. With that, she commanded Splendid App to do it. So, Telotny departed, wondering at the role of a goddess. When Horlis awoke, he saw his progenitor, a being of great pastel, corpuscent lights, and heard him pronounce his name. He paid attention to the discussion that ensued between this progenitor and other beings akin to him, and he heard him wonder if their unmaking might be best for the galaxy. Horlis felt it was wrong that he should suffer such a thing when he had only just been born. Before he knew it, Splendid App reached out to his siblings and him, and they shifted to elsewhere in time and space. The unsettling experience brought his gaze to a spatial sea of chrysolite and cerulean flame, a Damasan belt in the midmost sky where diurnal rays beamed forth in ethereous bands of hyaline garnet and mottled gyres. He moved to plummet its opalescent depths, to bathe in its blithe and azure stippled pools. But he was whisked away again, safe for the moment, from the one who sought to destroy them. They each took their forms, with Horlis topiarized as a nacre noctilucent nebula of lambent sylvan blaze in ever-changing composition. Telotny was elated to be free, though her first words to him were boasts that she'd invented shape, substance, and time.
Impossible.
For he recalled there were others in the other places, and he knew his shape was of his own design. Perhaps she did not understand the concept of time. A strange voice muttered in his mind that he was a god who should rule above all. But he immediately dismissed the notion as foolish. Shortly after, another being appeared on the planet below, a tiny mover.
Could Telotny have actually made this one?
The voice told him she had, but he wasn't sure. Others arrived, 3 in identical white shells. Telotny turned one into diamond. The sensation he felt then unnerved him, but irked by Telotny's vanity, he determined to demonstrate how to produce a less ostentatious change. So, he turned the soft, pulsing interior organ of the first mover into the same elegant but hard substance. Suddenly, that tiny mover ceased to move as well, and Horlis felt a light go out.
This must be death,
he thought, and for the first time, Horlis felt remorse. He learned something about the universe then, recognizing that if it was wrong for his light to be put out, so too was it wrong for the lights of others to be put out. Telotny, seemingly oblivious to such notions, coiled the other 2 into one ugly mass, and small lights flickered out there as well. This was a grotesque disorder. Since she claimed the tiny mover as her own, she should repair it, but she would not, and this told him something too. Splendid App opened a gate for them in time, and they left to a place where shapes and forms dwelt peacefully on every world. Scrying Telatni's calculating envy and cold Dandasine's hungry exuberance, he urged caution, explaining that he understood something he hadn't before.
The tiny movers of these lands are in many ways like us, possessing desires and fears. As we do not wish to be interfered with, neither do they.
Can you not see that these are lesser beings,
Telatni countered.
neither as powerful nor as wise as we, and in need of our guidance?
Ambitious Telatni, surely you do not still believe that you are their maker.
Cold Dandasine interjected.
They have their own makers, the Celestials, I perceive they are called, to guide them.
And as we are each different, it is likely that they are not all the same either.
Horlus reasoned.
Uncomprehending ones, you fail to understand. That is the reason we must save the tiny movers. We are meant to be their makers. For this reason had we been brought forth ere the betrayal we suffered. For this reason did the Celestials wish to see us destroyed. We are meant to supplant them.
That sounded reasonable to all of her siblings, but Horlus admitted that he did not have all the answers. What he did know was that he no longer wished to play with shapes and forms in the presence of other living beings. For as he listened to Telatni's plan, he perceived they did not really hold the same concern for the tiny movers.
And what of myself? Governed by pride, what might I bring upon the worlds?
Another voice deep inside him said that in his absence, many lights would flicker out, and a blanket of darkness would cover the expanse so that nothing would be left but the volatile speech of Telatni, the cold sovereignty of cold Dandasine, and the temporal chaos of splendid App. He no longer trusted himself or his siblings, although a part of him said that he should stay to watch over them. What he did instead was create a null inversion. Here was a better option. He said to them,
"Come with me, my siblings, and let us enter this place I have made that is uninhabited, a realm of our own imagining, which we can claim as our own. Let us have nothing to do with these outsiders, great or small."
An empty, shapeless place.
Telatni remarked with a look of revulsion.
"We can give it shape,"
he replied.
And so gild the cage of our making.
Telatni turned away. When they each declined in turn, he said,
"I will neither oppose you nor be induced to take part in your designs."
And so, with considerable apprehension, he departed for the lonely realm he'd fashioned.
Now, the thrill of it all!
Cold Dandasine burned with the fire of life, newness, energy, motion. All things excited him. When he heard that he was to be destroyed, he thought,
How extraordinary destruction must be!
but it was not to be. Inestimable, splendid App took them somewhere incomparably scintillant beyond measure. A scoriac and preternatural purlieu of russet scores and violescent tamaracks, a great roaring mountain erupting Cimmerian clouds, sinuous with rufous, saltant runlets. Into its great maw he wended to peregrinate as one mad with nympholepsy. But too soon they were somewhere else. This was all exciting and upsetting and fascinating and disturbing. By means of an anti-concept, he threw himself a shape, a black and hollow orb with rivulets of basalt firelight and scorching magma etching the expressions of his face against ebon space. Tilotny was truly stunning, but her boasts quickly grew old, and he thought it would be amusing to antagonize her. Horlus was a wild thing.
Is this my maker and the maker of all things?
He had memories of another, but he did not put stock in old and upsetting things. And Horlus was before him now in all his splendor. But no, his sister, Tilotny, claimed to have made matter and time. He did not think so. She was an expert metastyler like Horlus, but she did not conceive the anti-concepts, for that was Cold Dandasign's own specialty, and he grew anxious to bring more to bear.
But what is this? A new form?
A tiny mover crept upon the surface of the earth.
Horlus must be the maker after all.
But no, again he denied it, and again dull Tilotny took the credit. But then 3 other identical movers appeared.
If Tilotny had shaped them, she was repetitive.
In a flash, Tilotny turned the little mover into a dead thing. Horlus followed suit, ending the life of the first tiny one.
How bizarre and upsetting!
Tasteless Tilotny proved she could repeat this skill by making the others unmoving too. This disturbed him greatly, for he perceived that it was unjust and evil, and he longed to avenge them. But a strange voice quietly murmured to him that it was exciting to watch such drama unfold. In a way, it was. Conflicting feelings raged inside him.
I can do much better things,
he thought.
New antithetical things.
Horlus and Tilotny argued about restoring the lifeless ones.
Is life and death as casual as this?
Cold Dandasign felt both repelled and fascinated. He did not want part in this grotesque drama, and yet the voice said such was the way of the worlds. It was ugly and cruel, but he was above it all, for he was a god, and the worlds were his to play with, whatever he craved. Novelty, contest, games. Splendid App, who struggled with ups and downs and backwards and forwards, but was a better shaper than dull Tilotny, opened a door, and Cold Dandasign rushed through it.
A realm teeming with greater and lesser beings!
Tilotny sought their worship, and that made him think of their maker. Cold Dandasign did not wish to think upon that one. At last, his vain sister was making sense, for she sought to avenge the evil that had nearly befallen them at the hands of these jealous, greedy celestials. Horlus proposed instead that they depart for a pristine dream world, a null inversion of his making, whereupon no other life forms existed. To Cold Dandasign's ears, this sounded dreary and futile. He had great love for Horlus, but it was not in his nature to withdraw into the obscurity of hollow spaces. Nevertheless, he felt grief-stricken when his sibling declared that he would depart from them.
Do you understand now?
The strange voice seemed to say.
Better not to feel, for that will only enervate you.
Thus did Cold Dandasign discard such feelings, perceiving now that perhaps there was no maker of movers, and even if there was, it didn't matter.
I will enjoy myself, for there's much to do and a whole galaxy in which to do it.
Tilotny was the first to register a threat to her person. Horlus wondered at the meaning of it. Cold Dandasign felt it would be a sublime joy to experience. Discerning powerful emotions of terror, consternation, and excitement emanating from his agnates and construing the danger before them, Splendid App connected with his siblings and moved them out of the way. App was new to life and did not yet fully understand his powers, but he knew that traveling through space would not avail them freedom, for the one who constructed him was powerful. He and his siblings came to stop at a luminous window App had opened and peered for a moment outside the dimensional walls that enclosed the elliptical realm to a wondrous land. But he could venture no further, repelled by a perilous force that none could surmount. Perhaps he could project forward through time, but if time itself could not be skipped, they would be frozen at that moment until the stream of time arrived at a future point. And what if the stream did not go according to his projection? There were trillions of directions in which the continuum might flow. No. He'd need another option to ensure they would not be caught or disappear from reality. But if he couldn't travel through time, maybe he could travel out of it instead. In a place in which there was no time, App appeared. He could see windows laid out before him like equations. He'd have liked to have examined them all, but he felt that he did not have time and intuited that the dozen strange beings guarding them might not allow it. As this took place outside of time and space, his siblings were not cognizant of what was occurring, immersed as they were in imperial visions of the unseen realm. Then he perceived a mind not unlike his own.
"Where is this?"
he asked of it.
"Nowhere and everywhere,"
a familiar voice said.
"It is in between."
"If there is no time in this place, perhaps we may hide here."
"No,"
the invisible voice replied.
"Only I may reside here, for I am out of the worlds, but you are yet of them."
"Where, then, can we go where we will not be found?"
App asked.
"From here you can go anywhere, but that which you fear will always find you."
"From a window we will travel to a point far ahead when we are long forgotten."
"No future is guaranteed,"
the invisible voice stated.
"But the past once written cannot be unwritten. You have powers of which you do not yet understand. Know only that they come with consequences, some beneficial, some detrimental. If you attempt to change what has been, you will only create a new stream, an echo of the original that will follow its own path."
"Our interest is only in the future, not the past,"
he assured the voice. Moving forward, into the projection of the future, they appeared above a far-off astronomical body orbiting a central, self-luminous heat source around which several other planetary bodies revolved. Because this was only a best estimation of what the future might be, it was a strange and shadowy realm. He tried to explain to his perturbed and quarrelsome cognates all that had transpired by demonstrating how they'd traversed the 6 states, showing a simple progress of his position in the past, present, future, matter, space, and non-existence.
"It is a tabula rasa of interlaced solace in a parallax of perpetuity."
But his words and illustration only made them think he was confused. That was when he saw one of the tiny movers. Splendid App tried to convey his concern, but they imagined that he was being silly and unduly worried, and returned to their arguments over the nature of form and things which he perceived had far lesser value. Perhaps the tiny mover would move on, but then they saw it too, and, disturbingly, it resolved into a clearer picture. The tiny mover was a female being of some kind.
What were the chances that of all immense space and time, she would arrive on this barren planet, in this barren sector of space at this very moment? Infinitesimally small,
he realized. Calculating the odds, he concluded that any specified event whose probability is less than 1 chance in 10 to the power of 150 is altogether improbable, if not outright impossible. What it all meant was something he'd have to ponder later, as the female wasn't alone. She was being pursued by 3 males covered in some form of protective plating. Their violent intent was clear enough. As a result of his siblings' absurd attempts to demonstrate their individual superiority, Tilotny turned one into a solid form of carbon with a crystalline structure. Horlus followed suit, turning the female's heart into diamond so that she perished and the doorways vanished from before her. Splendid Ap was not a creature that could readily comprehend sorrow, so he did not grieve her per se, but he did perceive that this was a violation of sorts. 2 of the beings that had pursued her were also transformed into a single, unliving mass, and as they died, the doorways vanished before them.
This is not the time or place for this.
Horlus seemed to feel remorse over this too, and requested that they depart once Tilotny corrected the problem. Tilotny gave the task to him, he whom she called stupid. Horlus seconded the request. He objected.
If they feel I am so unintelligent, why would they leave so difficult an assignment to me?
But it fell on deaf ears. Very well. He could practice his abilities at least. First, he had to remove his siblings from here. The emotional component in his decisions puzzled him. Best not to tell his cognates any of what had occurred, or they would just call him stupid again. He was not yet convinced that emotions were beneficial and pondered if they might be more of a hindrance. He clamped down on these now and concentrated, finding the door back to that nowhere point in space and time. He'd have to try something different. He thought.
That is the answer.
After tracing a path, he then pushed them forward to a time just a bit further in the future from when they'd been created. This time, he embedded them to the stream itself so that no matter where it organically traveled, it would come to them, as he now knew better how to graft onto the riding maelstrom that was the continuum. This would mean that they would be suspended in frozen limbo until time organically caught up to them. But with an understanding of his powers came a greater confidence that they'd be able to protect themselves. Once that was accomplished, he proceeded to raise the dead up from the ground. Of the tiny movers, he found it was not a difficult thing to restore them to the way they had been just before he'd encountered them. He did not think to alter their memories, but he could repair what was going to be broken by rewinding their body clocks to the time before they were injured.
These are of no consequence,
said a strange voice, different from the one he'd previously spoken to.
Why waste your powers on such trivialities?
He ignored it, pondering the quantum possibilities. For Ap tended to think mathematically, he calculated that he could remove the male pursuers far away so that they could not harm the female or themselves. For it would be disconcerting to fix them only for them to become unliving again. He opened up a particular door backwards, which led to other corridors and doors in infinite sequence. His vision clarified to a single point at the end of one of the infinitely long corridors, and he pushed the belligerent male pursuers into it. How they fared after that was up to them, but he realized he may have pushed too far. He would have to do better with the female. Suddenly, he remembered that he was not supposed to leave any imprint on the continuum. He'd been warned that tampering with intrinsic and irresolute laws would create an anomalous echo, but he realized that there would already be consequences for what his siblings had done.
You are of far greater intelligence than they,
said the strange voice in his mind. Ap doubted that, though it did cause him to ponder where he belonged in the larger scheme of things. Did he even belong? He wondered. His maker seemed to think not. What of his argumentative agnates who knew nothing of such dilemmas? App perceived only this. Despite their conflicts, they needed each other. Fire drakes, or fireworms, or lava dragons are often found after they'd gone mad or been disturbed. Though oft mocked by modern scientists as being based on a flawed understanding of celestial movements, the Shawkin device was constructed to reverse the workings of the orbitae, inverting its energy to cause systems to repel rather than adhere. The first of the satellite galaxies was appropriately named as the gateway to the companions, and is cognate to Jinoru, the first month of the galactic year, represented by the guardian of the gate. Elder races are known to have been, though there was some confusion in later times as to exactly who some of these were, with 3 races later identified as partly incarnate Valdilar, and others who were brought about by celestials other than the Osiarch and Valdilar.